Thanks so much. I appreciate that introduction. And thank you guys for the beautiful weather. It's been cold the last few places, so I'm so glad to be here. And I'd like to start off telling you about my grandmother, because she's the one who gave me the love I have of my country. She's the one who instilled American values in me, because she was an immigrant, and she explained that in the old country, it didn't matter how hard you worked. It didn't matter if you worked a second or third job. The government took all the extra away because they wanted everybody to be the same. Now, listening to her, it might sound like she was from Soviet Union, maybe an Eastern Bloc country. Actually, she was from Denmark. And unfortunately, we're headed more towards Denmark every day. The politicians in Washington think that they should have control over you, and I'm here to tell you that you know better than they do, and that's why I'm asking for your vote for President of the United States.
Woo! You got it! I can't vote any harder!
Our current government is too big, too bossy, too nosy, too intrusive. And besides, what gives them the right? We need to put decision-making power back into your hands, because you can spend your money better than any special interest, lobbyist, or bureaucrat in Washington can. Now, Americans would never budget to spend $80 billion a year to keep families separated from their loved ones, but that's the end result with our prison system. We cannot claim to be the land of the free when we lead the world in incarcerations. We have about 5% of the world's population, but house 20% of its prisoners.
That doesn't make any sense.
One of the biggest factors that's led to a quadrupling of the prison population since 1980 is the racist and destructive war on drugs. In particular, mandatory minimums have taken discretion out of the hands of judges, and instead force mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters to spend 10, 20 years, sometimes even a lifetime in prison for a supposed crime that had no victim. All we have to do is take a step back to the Prohibition era to see the parallels. Despite knowing how poorly Prohibition went, what we have, alcohol prohibition that is, what we have is a carbon copy. Drug kingpins have replaced mob bosses, and drug dens have replaced speakeasies. When was the last time you heard of a liquor store owner going up and down the halls of a high school trying to push gin onto high school students? Or when's the last time you heard of a vodka addict breaking into houses in order to support his vodka habit? And when's the last time you heard of two liquor store owners having a shootout over the best corner? What we have now is not a drug problem. What we have is a prohibition problem. There should be no law preventing you from owning an object, whether it's a gun to defend yourself or drugs for whatever reason you wish. As your president, I will federally decriminalize all drugs so that we can bring people back to their families, so we can treat drug use as a health issue, not a criminal issue.
Woo! Yes, please!
We should allow the medical community to deal with substance abuse in a way that salvages lives instead of throwing them away. Accordingly, I will pardon anyone convicted at the federal level of any victimless crime. These are just a few steps towards ending the over-incarceration of people of color and letting consensual adult activities become safer and less stigmatized. Excuse me. In addition to overcrowding our federal prisons, the war on drugs has negatively affected the interactions that many Americans have with police. The drug war has single-handedly created gangs that police themselves, often through violence. Consequently, the federal government has created a police state in which the DEA, which receives, by the way, $3 billion of our tax dollars annually, come in and raid medical marijuana clinics where medical marijuana is completely legal. And long gone is the friendly local patrol officer who knows everyone on the beat by name. Instead, we've had the federal government import nameless, faceless SWAT teams. And it doesn't stop with the DEA. In recent months, we've seen the Department of Homeland Security, which receives another $50 billion in tax dollars, patrolling our streets in military fatigues. As your president, I will defund federal involvement in policing, including the DEA and DHS.
Yes!
That means ending the supplying of surplus military equipment like tanks and tear gas to over 8,000 federal, state, and local police forces. I will end no-knock raids, which too often end up killing innocent bystanders like Breonna Taylor. And as Libertarian Congressman Justin Amash has pointed out, when police do misbehave, it's nearly impossible to take legal action because of an arcane doctrine known as qualified immunity, which states that victims can only successfully sue an officer when a clear rights civil violation has already been established in a prior case. When I am president, I will end qualified immunity so that police are held to the same standard as everyone else. Now, while millions of Americans have suffered from the government's war on drugs, nearly every American has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic in some way. South Korea confirmed its first case within a day of our first case, and they quickly jumped ahead in testing, able to contain the spread. As infections in the U.S. skyrocketed, South Korea nearly eradicated COVID-19, and they did so without any lockdowns. A testing initiative put forth by Bill Gates was the first to roll out a test in the U.S. that could be done outside of a hospital system. In 10 weeks, they processed 20,000 tests. Yet on May 12th, the DEA came in and stopped them from further testing, saying they needed, quote unquote, further assessment. This is just one example of how the FDA has stood in the way of us being tested. Currently, only those companies with enough money and resources can even get FDA approval. And once they do, they weaponize their patents by holding a monopoly. It costs about $1 billion to bring a drug to market, and thanks to the FDA, it's about a 10-year process. Meanwhile, it's the patients who suffer, desperately waiting for a drug that just might save their lives. New medicines and procedures should get to patients as quickly and safely as possible. When I am your president, I will either end the efficacy requirement of the FDA, if not the FDA entirely. The FDA is not the only issue that we have with our health care. Let's be honest, it's not working for anyone. And my heart breaks for the millions of Americans who've been left behind, the many families who've been bankrupted by our current system. Now, for decades, politicians in Washington have blamed our rising costs on our free market system, saying therefore we need a single payer system. Well, I have some news for them. We haven't had anything close to a free market healthcare system in close to a century. And the alternative to our current big government failure isn't an even bigger government failure. When politicians say we need Medicare for all, what I hear them say is we need VA hospital for all. And that system isn't acceptable for anyone, especially those who are willing to sacrifice or to put their lives out to possibly sacrifice their lives for our country. We cannot wait for government to decide who lives and who dies. We have to put the power back in the hands of the patients. As I see it, our biggest problem with our healthcare system is that our insurance isn't really insurance at all. In any other industry, insurance only pays for unexpected costs. Therefore, costs are held relatively low. In our case, though, in our broken healthcare system, insurance pays for everything. So imagine if your car insurance paid for gas, oil, or car washes. First of all, you would have absolutely no reason to shop around for the lowest gas prices. In fact, you'd probably go to the nicest gas station where they give you free coffee while you wait. Because what do you care? You whip out your little $5 copay card and you pay as much there as you would the cheapest gas station. Therefore, gas stations would have no reason to compete on price. They could simply raise the prices, passing them along to the car insurance companies. And what would they do? They would simply raise your premiums the following year. This spiral is exactly what's going on in our healthcare system. Patients have absolutely no reason to shop for prices. Therefore, healthcare providers have no reason to compete on prices. What's happening is our insurance companies are increasing prices every year without any accountability, and we're the ones left footing the bill. Now, the best system of free market around the world that's as close to a free market system as you can find is in Singapore. And in their country, costs are 1/3 of what they are here. And by the way, a doctor's visit is $10, which is less than our copay. The state of Indiana, for its employees union, has a similar system, and they've been able to get generic drug use to go from 10% up to 90%. And the best part about it, the patients were glad to do it because they got to keep the savings. And that's the way it should be. You should be able to shop around for prices, and then you get to keep the savings and spend that money on whatever you want. The VA system needs to be converted into a system like the state of Indiana, where we put dollars into the pockets of veterans. And then we let the veterans decide how and when and where to use those dollars.
Yeah. Yes, please.
The government letdown of our soldiers doesn't begin with the healthcare system. It begins from the day they enlist. There are currently people deployed overseas who weren't even born yet when the war on terror began. The U.S. spends more on military than the next 7 countries combined. And we're in 150 different countries around the world.
Bring them home.
And what do we have to show for it? We've had about 500,000 deaths in the last 20 years alone in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq, including 250,000 civilians. Those are parents, siblings, and children who will never return home. In every election, candidates promise peace, but they only deliver more war. If I'm elected president, my first act will be to bring the troops home.
Yes.
I want to turn America into one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. We absolutely have to defend our shores. We have to have a well-trained military, but we need to stop meddling around the world and make peace with our world neighbors. The military budget, unfortunately, isn't the only example of how the government has misdirected the economy. The IRS taxes Americans at every turn, and only those with enough resources to hire personal accountants and tax lawyers can even navigate the code. The IRS that taxes us to death also probes into every personal financial decision we make. Meanwhile, the government itself has run rampant. Now, some in Washington think we need to increase military spending, and the other half think we need to increase domestic spending. So what's their bipartisan compromise? They simply increase all spending. As your president, my veto pen is going to need a lot of extra ink. Runaway spending is also made possible by the Federal Reserve. When the federal government isn't able to raise taxes, it simply prints more money. And without any backing, since the Fed was created over a century ago, the American dollar has lost 96% of its value. We should reduce regulations on cryptocurrency and any other form of currency and allow them to enter the market. As your president, I will first audit and then end the Federal Reserve. I will eliminate the IRS and work with Congress towards eliminating the federal income tax altogether. It's time to move the money out of the government sector and back into the hands of the people who earned it. Politicians and bureaucrats don't know what you need. You do. When it comes to cutting spending, we shouldn't take any options off the table. I would like to see baseline budgeting, where instead of assuming an increase, we instead start at zero and only add what's vital. It's time for the American government to balance its checkbook the same way the American family has to.
Stop bankrupting the
Now,
next generation.
Given the challenges we face as a country, it's easy to feel like the change I'm talking about just can't happen. But I believe it can because I believe in you. I believe in the individuals who make up our great country. I see America through my grandmother's eyes, a place where the rights of the individual are greater than the power of government, a place where freedom means minimum government and maximum freedom, a place where the American dream isn't a dream at all, it's real and it's right there in front of you because you made it happen. As I ask for your vote this November, it's not because I'm asking you to cast a vote for me. Instead, I want you to vote for you. I think you know best how to spend your money. I think you know best what your family needs. You know best what's best for you. Thank you so much.